You know what's truly bizarre about human behavior? On one side of the internet, millions of people treat Donald Trump like an absolute hero. To them, his total disregard for the rules isn't a flaw, it's a massive, refreshing symbol of freedom. Then, you have the exact other half of society. These people spend 5 hours a day staring at glowing rectangles, raising their blood pressure and typing furious essays in the comments. They genuinely believe that being incredibly angry on the internet makes them morally superior. They think they are saving the world from a toxic matrix. If you look at this deafening political circus and think, has everyone completely lost their minds? I have some very comforting news. Nobody has lost their mind. Whether you are the person fiercely defending him right now, or the person whose stomach drops just hearing his name, you are both trapped, not by a political agenda, but by the exact same primitive caveman instinct. You look across the aisle and see a broken, irrational enemy. But in the world of neuroscience, you are basically identical twins. Your brains are running the exact same flawless survival software to handle the chaos of the modern world. Let's look at the fascinating cognitive psychology behind this outrage and see why you both secretly need this drama to feel safe. Let's start with the people who treat him like a cultural savior, the ones who would happily buy a golden sneaker or a digital trading card just because he told them to. The modern world is terrifyingly complex. Every single day, you are bombarded with new social rules, economic anxieties, shifting cultural norms, and endless digital noise that your brain was never designed to process. When the environment becomes highly unpredictable, the human nervous system goes into a state of chronic overwhelm. This triggers a fascinating survival mechanism known as predictability bias, paired with an extreme craving for cognitive ease. Your brain consumes a tremendous amount of physical energy to calculate nuances, gray areas, and political correctness. So when a polarizing figure steps to the microphone, completely ignores the established etiquette, speaks in absolute certainties, and never ever apologizes, a massive wave of relief washes over the primitive brain. This isn't just about politics or tax policies. This is about neurological efficiency. When people feel they are losing their grip on their own lives, whether because of inflation, institutional distrust, or just the chaotic speed of the internet, they suffer from a fractured locus of control. They feel entirely powerless. By aligning with a leader who acts like a human wrecking ball, they vicariously borrow his perceived power. To the tribal brain, an aggressive, unapologetic leader is deeply comforting. He provides a psychological shelter. His hardcore supporters aren't uneducated or brainwashed, as the internet loves to claim. They are simply neurologically exhausted by a society that demands they constantly walk on eggshells. He is the ultimate sledgehammer to those eggshells, and the primitive brain absolutely loves a sledgehammer. But what about the other side? What about the millions of highly educated people who wake up, brew a nice cup of artisan coffee, and immediately ruin their own morning by scrolling through his latest speeches? If you belong to the fiercely anti-Trump camp, you probably think you are a beacon of justice. You think your angry tweets are saving democracy, but neurochemically, you are playing a very dangerous game of addiction. Let me introduce you to a concept called moral grandstanding. For hundreds of thousands of years, being kicked out of your tribe meant certain death. To stay in the tribe, you had to constantly prove your loyalty and your value. Today, we don't have literal saber-toothed tigers to fight. So how do you prove to your modern digital tribe that you are a good and valuable person? You find a hyper-visible, polarizing enemy, and you throw digital stones at him. Every time you type a furious, sarcastic comment mocking his behavior or his followers, your brain releases a massive hit of dopamine, but it also releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. You feel deeply chemically connected to everyone else who is hitting the like button on your angry comment. You convince yourself you are fighting a political crisis, but in reality, your nervous system is hijacking your outrage to manufacture a sense of belonging. This creates a self-sustaining loop of cortisol addiction. Your brain actually starts to crave the stress of hating him. Why? Because predictable anger is much easier to process than unpredictable anxiety. The outrage makes you feel alive. It gives your chaotic day a clear, easily defined villain. Without him, the outrage crowd would have to face the quiet, boring, and highly nuanced anxieties of their own personal lives. And frankly, facing your own psychological baggage is much harder than screaming at a screen. So one side uses him as a psychological shield against the exhaustion of modern rules. The other side uses him as a biological dopamine dispenser to feel a sense of moral superiority and tribal safety. Neither side is operating on pure logic. You are both just trying to soothe your overwhelmed nervous systems.
So we have established that both sides are using this man as a deeply comforting psychological tool. But here is where our documentary takes a darker turn. Because the human brain's survival mechanisms always come with a hidden cost, a massive psychological bill that eventually comes due. Let's look at the hidden cost for the fiercely loyal supporters. When you build your entire worldview around an unapologetic, aggressive figure to escape the exhausting rules of society, it feels like you have found an invincible fortress. You celebrate the absolute certainty. You wear the merchandise like tribal armor. It feels incredibly empowering to mock the fragility of the modern world. But here is the brutal paradox. When you tie your emotional safety and your core identity to the dominance of one unpredictable billionaire, you completely surrender your own personal power. You become hypervigilant, treating any criticism of him as a direct physical threat to your own ego. You start cutting off friends, isolating yourself from family members, deeply convinced that they are simply blind while you are the only one who is awake. The thick, rebellious shell you built to protect yourself from a chaotic society eventually hardens into a very lonely, paranoid cage. You think you're a lone wolf, surviving the Matrix, but in reality, you have just become emotionally dependent on a politician to regulate your daily anxiety. And now, let's turn the mirror toward the self-proclaimed saviors of morality, the highly educated critics who spend their days aggressively quote-tweeting his worst moments. Here is your devastating social hypocrisy. While you are shouting from the digital rooftops about how incredibly dangerous this figure is, you are actually dedicating hours of your finite human life to amplifying his voice. You genuinely think you are dismantling a toxic system, but in reality, you have become the most flawless, reliable, unpaid employee in his marketing department. The social media algorithms do not care about your moral grandstanding. They do not care about your sarcastic takedowns or your beautifully written essays on democracy. They only care about engagement. Your collective outrage is the exact fuel that keeps his cultural dominance alive. You are so profoundly addicted to the neurochemical rush of fighting a villain that you accidentally keep feeding the villain just so you can maintain your own sense of purpose. It's a tragic cycle of voluntary slavery, carefully disguised as digital activism. Both sides are sacrificing their peace, their relationships, and their time, all to participate in a grand, invisible theater. You are both paying a massive psychological tax, and the only winner is the algorithm. So, the next time you look across the aisle and think the other side is completely brainwashed, uneducated, or incredibly dangerous, take a deep breath. Neither of you is broken. You are both just navigating a chaotic, exhausting world, desperately trying to feel safe. One side finds that safety in the absolute, unapologetic certainty of a controversial leader, while the other side finds safety by throwing digital stones at him to keep their modern tribal fire burning. It's not madness, it is just biology. But what is your physical proof? What was the exact political post, tweet, or news headline you recently screenshotted just to send to a friend so you could both be outraged together? Drop that specific headline in the comments so we can expose this moral theater we are all secretly playing. If this hit home for you and completely changed your perspective on this endless, toxic versus politically correct fight, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to understand the other unspoken truths about how your mind works, the next video is going to hit you even harder. Tap the screen to keep decoding your behavior, and I'll see you there.